Welcome, everybody. Today's session is episode 12 of the educational web series offered by Matrix Integrated Solutions. We're joined by Larry Cox and Dave Scourfield and myself, Jeremy Russell. Today's topic is 100 years of consulting horror stories. And the topic kind of came to us from a standpoint of just what could we share with all the experience that we have in the room to talk about different aspects of business applications and beyond just applications, but how do we curb the ability to have some failure in the IT space and also some personnel space and some things of that nature. So we're just going to open this up as a kind of follow a set of topics and talk about stories that we've come up with to talk about how we can avoid those horror stories and get through different aspects of business life. So with that being said, I'm going to move to the agenda. We're going to talk about 5 different areas of challenge from our view, being the consultant's view, what we saw happen in a client around these different areas of challenges. And then we're just going to open up for Q&A and have an open discussion and talk through some things as people need to or want to. So the first topic is fraud. Larry, do you want to tell us some stories about fraud, or Dave, do you want to kick off?
Well, I'll start off. I mean, I remember being a young accountant and taking auditing in college and saying, well, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen. But over all the years, I've been stunned by the amount of fraud that I've observed, happening at clients. And so often the fraud could be prevented by just very basic controls being put in with a company. I'll give you an example that this was actually from my CPA days. That one company had a bookkeeper that was a trusted bookkeeper, and basically they were a dealership and had a floor plan for their vehicles. And the accountant would come in with a check that was being written to the bank to finance the floor plan and bring it in every month. And he would just sign the check because he knew it was going to the bank. And she was going in and taking that check, say she'd write the check for 20 grand, and she'd take it in, and she just so happened to have her credit card at the bank as well. So she'd take the 20 grand check and place 16 grand to the floor plan to the bank, and 4 grand for a personal credit card. So he just, wasn't paying attention to the actual invoices that were coming in. And she wound up getting in for a couple $100,000 on that. And it was just a very basic accounting control that, wasn't being followed, that resulted in costing this business owner quite a bit of money. Another real basic one I can recall is observing, taking a look at the bank statement and not necessarily letting the person issuing the checks receive the bank statement. I remember one that another controller decided they needed some money, and a great idea was to cash in the cash value of all the life insurance policies. And the check came in, he deposited them and took them right back out of the account, and to him personally, and built a very nice house. And that's actually how they got. Trying to figure out how that guy wound up with that house on his salary. It turns out that the life insurance policies no longer existed. So again, those are just a couple examples that aren't necessarily IT related, but division of duties is second.
Yeah.
Someone else, I'll be at Matrix, we're small, but we've got division of duties. The bank statement goes to someone else other than the person writing the checks. I mean, it's just basic controls that can be followed. I mean, they're hard in smaller organizations, but but do them as much as possible, because again, once the smaller the organization, sometimes the larger the exposure, because someone can cover more ground. So
Yeah, that is the difficulty in a small organization. Typically what we'll see is, especially in a small business, is you have one person kind of that's the hub of the organization that controls a lot of the aspects of the finance task, right?
Mhm.
And so, I'm remembering, I mean, this goes back 20 plus years, one of our Sage customers, and they had a woman who would have been considered the office manager, and she pretty much handled everything. I mean, she opened the mail, she was involved in processing of deposits, payments, um, was involved. I don't know that she was involved in the bank reconciliation function, but what ended up happening was she would actually pay vendors through the system. She would print the checks out of the system. I mean, this is crazy when you think about it, but she would print the check out of the system, have the owner sign the check, and then before she updated the batch, she went in and changed the checks were to her basically. She went and reset the vendor master file, the name on the vendor master file. So if you looked in the system, it looked as though the check went out to the vendor, but in fact, the payee on the check was herself, and she ended up getting. I mean, it was a good chunk of money for a small business, and that's like to Larry's point. That's just basic controls. I mean, somebody to actually open the bank statement, review the clear checks against the bank statement, and the payee would have snuffed that out. So, but the difficulty really is how do you, in a small company, how do you segregate the duties sufficiently so that you can,
or at least audit those controls. I mean, segregation of duties is definitely a big one.
yeah.
So my example, which is kind of similar similar ideas, come in a delivered product on their own truck. The employee would take the product out. He would load up his truck with more stuff. No one was monitoring what he was taking out of the warehouse. He would go with an invoice that was pre-cut to an invoice. He'd make up an order. He would get the inventory on his truck and then create the invoice, or the company would create the invoice. Then he was in cahoots, and he would collect the cash on delivery, come back and delete the invoice, and then keep the cash.
Yeah.
So, and they always wondered why they were so far off on inventory. Well, it's because people were taking inventory. They didn't take control over what was leaving the warehouse. They're letting employees load their own trucks, and people were selling it off the truck. So.
Yeah, we had a similar one with a customer that was primarily a distributor, but they had a walk-up counter, so they would have customers come in and pick up product and a buy product, and the employee was creating invoices to deliver the product, and then taking the cash and then deleting the invoice. Very similar to what you're describing, Jeremy. And there's, how do you really control that kind of situation, right? I mean, that's really difficult, other than inventory. Inventory ultimately would show that, but that's a really difficult one to control.
Yeah, or the invoice, the picking form's got to go to somebody else, not just the person that's entering the order. So the pick tickets get reconciled later.
Yeah,
with what invoices got created, right? Someone's got to do a secondary audit that orders from the front.
They do have a nice feature in Sage that is the retain deleted invoices function in accounts receivable.
Right.
Basically, if you initiate an invoice data entry, and then a user creates the invoice and subsequently deletes it before the batch is updated, that record still appears on the sales journal as deleted, and it updates to the invoice history file as deleted, so you can run an audit against that. So, Sage has got some controls built into it, but it's a question of, has that been implemented, right? Is that been turned on, and is somebody actually monitoring that activity? So,
great point. Keeping all voided or deleted transactions in the system is a good setting to have in that scenario.
Yeah.
And that, back to that original thing we were talking about controls, I think back to years ago, my father was a branch manager of a bank, and one of the controls that they instituted was he was required to take 2 weeks vacation a year. And the whole basis of that was that, hey, somebody that could be, what's the term, kiting or something like that, or, some of the fraud schemes involved, that, hey, you have to be involved on a pretty regular basis, But if you take a person out of action for a 2-week period, sometimes some things might float to the surface that you're not aware of. So that would, to me, was, so for you key people out there, you should go in and recommend that you have more vacation.
I was going to ask this. This sounds like a perfect time to talk about our vacation policy.
No, but seriously, that is a decent control to put in place sometimes. So it will reveal sometimes what people are up to.
Yeah.
As let's keep just timing wise, we'll try to spend 5 to 10 minutes per topic and keep this kind of trapped in. So the next topic, wrong button. Next topic is backups, and I know we just had a session on sorry, I thought I deleted people out of the meeting, so oh good, I didn't. So the topic is around backups and disaster recovery. We just had a session. I know a couple people that are in this meeting actually attended that as well, but backups and storing data off-site and kind of having a disaster recovery plan. Horrors are of plenty. We hear it all the time where something happens. So who wants to kick off with some reference stories there?
I mean, this one's pretty simple, right? Everybody assumes that we assume that every system is getting backed up daily. And I mean, it seems so elementary and simple that we're getting backups, but I can tell you over the years, I mean, we've been involved in a number of instances where, a system goes down or there's a major corruption in data and the customer goes to restore the system. They don't have the backup that they think they have. I mean, the backup may in fact be running, but are they actually getting a backup of what they think they're getting? Does it successfully complete? And I think, to take it beyond that is, maybe the backup's running, but, have we gone through a test recovery of the system? So we can be getting a backup, but if we have a system failure, can we actually get recovered? And we actually have some of our larger customers that go through that process of, going through a restore process to see how quickly they can get the environment back up and running. I was involved in one about 10 years ago with a pretty good sized customer of ours, and they had went through a ransomware situation and tried to recover from that. And they had backups, but because they had not, it was a pretty involved system, a lot of integrations, and because of the complexity, I guess, of the environment, I mean, they ended up being down over a week. And so it's one thing, can I recover the data, but do I have a process to recover the environment and the system in place such that I'm not down for a week or two trying to get this. So, kind of going through that process. And then I think the third component to that is, we've had this where customers getting a backup, but are they actually taken off site? If all your backup, right. and I mean, this is not so common anymore, but do you have an off-site a backup situation so that if you have an issue at the at the facility, you have a fire, or somebody comes in and takes the. I think
this was years ago, but they had to serve. Somebody broke in, stole the server and the box with all the backups in it. So they lost. That was a get out the paper and recreate everything situation. So that was ugly. But as crazy as it sounds, the guys, they took the backups as well. So it's just prudent to every now and then get something off site or up in the cloud or something, backup to your backup per se.
Well, the other backup to the backup, and then the other point to that is data retention, and we've been involved in this ourselves, and we've seen it a number of times with customers. Is we're getting backed up daily, but how far back can you go? We've been involved in situations, you get to the end of the month and there's just certain things that you do at the end of the month and you realize that you can only get back 15 days. And so you don't really have then a strategy to get back to where you actually need to go before the data corruption or before the issue happened. And so
it's very important, even if you've got someone performing your backups, to know and be aware of their data retention policy. So how far back you actually can go if you need to.
Yeah, simple stuff. I mean, it's just so simple and elementary, but yeah, I think the reason we're sitting here today talking about this is because it's happened.
Yeah, we've all
It's
seen
happened
it.
Yeah,
so
it's
many
real life.
times, and I mean, I hate to say it, but I can remember, Larry, this is going back 15 years ago or 20 years ago. It was a little company, fortunately, but they had to go back a year and reestablish the history. I don't even remember.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a small system, so fortunately, they were able to go back to like printed journals and recover from that. But they assumed that backup was running nightly, never really looked at it, never tested it. Needed to get back to it, and they were kind of resurrecting their system from paper, So
Yeah, when we gripe about printing those journal reports, now we know why we need to print those and kill some trees.
Yeah, kill some trees, right? Because that, you know what, that was before paperless office, Jeremy, and that was their lifeline. That was their lifeline back to
Right.
what the system was, and so it's just it's unfortunate, but it does happen. I mean, it's real, So,
Yeah, I think that retention I have to weigh as well. I had a client that they were doing about 8,000 invoices a week, and when you think about, can I go back to last Friday? Well, last Friday, 8,000 transactions have happened since then. So, your tolerance for disaster recovery becomes a heightened state when you're doing that many transactions a week, or you know, the amount of data that they have has to be looked at. If you're doing 50 a week and you have to recover from a week, big deal. We can knock that out pretty quick, but you got to judge your own transaction load. And I think the other thing that we get pigeoned into is only looking at, where Sage is at or where the accounting system is at and where that data is at. But, all the other data, like I had someone that, had never backed up their Outlook inbox, and they had 20,000 emails in there that, they just thought they were just keeping in there for historical purposes. Well, the box went corrupt and they never had a backup of it. So all their contracts were gone and, things of that nature. So think beyond just the accounting system as well.
yeah, are you talking about us? Are you referring to us, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about, I mean, you see this, right? And we're guilty of this too, is like how much stuff are people saving and carrying around on their personal laptops? It's not, I mean, I'm guilty. I'm raising my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raising our hands to that. I mean, there's a lot of corporate company data that really ought to be on a server somewhere and being backed up that we're walking around with on our phones and our laptops. It's just completely unsecure. So unsecure and, not backed up. So.
Well, now with the invention of OneDrive and Google Drive and all these cloud-based storage units that everybody has, putting the documents in those arenas at a minimum will help that problem if the laptop craps out, or you still get to it, but you got to remember to save it out there or make sure that that folder's getting synced up. But
well, you know what does it? I mean, from an applications perspective, not to put a pitch in for Sage, but I mean, we use Sage CRM internally. And we also we don't use it internally, but we have a couple document management solutions that integrate into Sage. And so, those are solutions that really kind of resolve the issue, right? Any document related to a customer can be filed in the CRM application. That's on a server that gets backed up. Everybody has access. And so you're taking these, documents that are now in silos and putting them, to a place where everybody can get to them and they're getting backed up. So.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So third topic that we have to talk about today is critical staff. I think, Larry, you had a really good example of this happening, and where critical staff member has left and they kind of housed all the knowledge of one system or one process or many. But can you allude on that?
It's just a controller situation that something happened between the controller and the owner, and she just said, I quit, and walked out. And there were no checklists. There was no, she had her own unique system of filing of documents. No one knew how to, I mean, they were Sage customer, but nobody knew how to write checks. No one knew how to do payroll. It was it was a situation where I was there for about, not every day, but I was there for 2 months, a couple times a week, because just, we just basic as where did this tax return get filed or not? No record of it. Where is it? It was quite the mess, and really it was the absence of checklists, someone's, even though she was a key person, but someone having some idea of what was going on in the office besides one person. Because the reality is, in that situation, it was a conflict that occurred, but we've also had those situations. We had one situation with a client that, the key person contracted COVID and walked out one day and never came back.
Actually, it had happened twice, right?
Yeah,
Sadly
never
enough,
came
that
back.
happened
So it
twice.
was like, go in and try to figure out what's going on, even the basic, what are the passwords? To
Yeah,
access.
right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real difficult one to patrol, because like you said, typically, a lot of times you've got one person at the center of the finance function that has the keys to all of this stuff. But certainly basic stuff like logins, like not who do we bank with, but basic banking information, like basic work instructions, like how do we get a month end, what is the month end process? It's like, how do we get to the daily tasks that we have to do, to document that, we understand is difficult, but just to have that documented so that in the event something does happen, that you've got some idea as to, where you go to run your, do the things that you do to run the business, so important.
Yeah, we had a couple different people that were at a client of mine that together they got upset at the ownership and left, and they purposely left a lot of things undone because there's no checks and balances on their processes as well. So they left it in shambles because they're felt jaded or kind of disruptive in nature. So make sure you have some cross training. I know that's always a hard thing. Someone from AP to AR, or, someone that can pick up the ball. I mean, Larry's example of 2-week vacation would solve that a little bit. Making sure that someone's out of the loop to make sure the business can still run and accomplish what it needs to do on a daily. But certainly a really hard thing to mitigate. But from a standpoint of us as consultants, we've been pulled into those arenas, as Larry kind of mentioned, where we come in to help in the short term and try to shuffle through and cross train people as quickly as we can and do what we can to help. But know that we are a resource available for that. But it also impacts our business. As we look across the client base, it's tough to devote that much time to those scenarios.
Yeah, and I mean, the difficulty for us a lot of times is, we understand the Sage system, but we don't necessarily know the specific customer processes, right? So, yeah, we're pretty good, at detective work to kind of work backwards to come up with what they were doing, but it's just a slower process, obviously. I think the only way to mitigate that really is, cross training, but that's real difficult in a small organization. At a minimum, have some kind of work instruction, right?
Yes.
Like, how do we get through the process of cash receipts? And it can just be, we've put them together for customers, I've had a handful of our larger customers that have done it themselves and require that it gets done, because the other benefit to that is it just makes transition with a new employee that much easier, right? If the handoff is that much simpler, here's how we do what we do. And it doesn't have to be, that detailed. It just needs to be bullet point. Where do we go to do what we do from a systems perspective? So.
All right, enough said about critical people. Let's hit the next topic, which is user testing. And the context of this is around updates and upgrades and even go live. We're in the middle of a couple go lives right now, but that lead up time to that date, the data flip over to go live, or I'm going to update to the newest version, user testing and acceptance of the system in the sandbox, and is it ready to roll? You guys have some examples there of some horror stories?
I don't know that I've got any specific horror stories other than to say, very important, obviously, especially, I mean, where we see it a lot is with upgrades. So, and it's not so bad if you're not coming from a very old version, but, customers that are coming from old versions and a lot of feature changes, a lot of customizations. I mean, we understand that it is difficult to fully test the system while we're also asking the same people to continue to do their daily work. But, the more testing that we can do and solve the issues before we take them live on the new version, the better the go live is going to be, and the less chance there is that we're going to, have missed something significant in the process, especially if you have a system that's been customized or you have a system that has third-party integrations. Those are probably the biggest areas of risk and concern, right? Is,
Right.
if there's been a lot of customization and or third-party.
Well, integrations. I mean,
Integrations,
integrations.
Yeah.
We're working through one that, this week we detected there was basically a process that I was running, in the evening, everybody okayed to do it. And then it stopped because there was an integration went in that evening that I didn't even know about. Oh, yeah. Well, did anybody tell this person? Well, no. So fortunately we caught that, but that's the big fear I think I have a lot of times is more and more systems are being integrated. And when there's integration and we're doing an upgrade or something like that, and we don't know about it, and through the process of the upgrade, we break the integration that we didn't even know existed. And then, it's usually recoverable, but it results in, a little bit of trauma, for the customer side as well as for the consultant, in terms of, holy smokes, we got to get this running in a hurry.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Anything
How critical
that's-
is it?
Yeah. And I would say this, I mean, anything that has come through Matrix that's stage related integration, right? We're aware of that.
Yeah,
When we upgrade a system, we scope out the system. I mean, that's part of what we do is try to understand what customizations. But one of our questions is always, is there any other products or solutions that integrate? It could be something as simple as, we see this a lot, customers that know how to query data out of Sage into Excel, right?
Mhm.
Users can do that from their desktop if they're trained to do it. A lot of our customers do that. Well, we're not aware of that. We can't see that through the interface. It's not anything we've been involved with. And so when we go to upgrade the system, if the data dictionary changes or the location of Sage changes, all that potentially needs to be either reconfigured or redone. We're breaking that. It's a simple integration, but we're breaking it and we're just not aware of it. So we try to ask the question, is there anything else that's connecting into Sage, that uses Sage, either input or output, that we might break with this? But, we're not aware of all of that. And so, that's stuff.
See if I can turn that off. I don't know how to, the heartbeat, but the, I think the question of user testing, we had a client that, we set the sandbox up. It was a fairly entailed implementation. They were coming from a very old version. And we asked the controller and the key personnel, have you gotten into the system? Have you done some transactions? And they said, yes, 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 yes. Come to find out, no one had. Everyone was, feeling like they got in the system and they looked at some data, but they didn't walk through the critical process of the business. And that one is an invoicing function was, 8,000 invoices a week. And, all of a sudden, something went haywire. So all of a sudden it's, becomes a problem in the 11th hour, which no one likes. And we all spend too much time and it causes gray hair. But that user acceptance testing when updating or upgrading or putting a new system into place is a key aspect of a place where we've seen a lot of, that last minute problem showing up to throw a big monkey in the wrench on that implementation.
Yeah, and it's always kind of like the areas of risk, right? I mean, I always say the most important thing is, can we sell and ship product to customers and collect cash? I mean, those things have to happen, right? The
Yeah,
rest
right.
of it's like, yeah, we'll figure out later if we have to, but we've got to be able to take an order and make a product and ship it to a customer, or deliver a service, whatever it is. So
And if you have payroll, you need to be able to run payroll.
yeah, we have to be able to make the payroll. Yeah.
Payroll's number one.
No one likes it when we don't get paid.
Yeah. Yeah, I was part of a client that ran payroll and they couldn't run payroll, and they're a union shop, and you see a bunch of union people running up on you. Payroll doesn't get cut correctly.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen. I think
different
we may have
ballgame.
been there a couple times.
Yeah.
We will handwrite the checks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's guess. Let's
Yeah.
just get people out the door. All right, enough said on user testing. Our last topic before our bonus topic is due diligence in the sales process. And I think, what we've seen is someone can get in a demo like this, where we're doing short webinars, get really hyped up on a product and see that it's going to save the planet, and their world's going to be, instantly changed, and they might buy something, but they don't really go through the due diligence in that sales process to make sure that it's going to do what they expect it to do and expectations are met. Any good stories on that process, guys?
Well, I had one that, we were demoing Sage overall, and everything was good. And we're getting towards the end, and we want to go over some of the manufacturing capabilities. And at that point, the demo had gone very well, but it was running over, and everybody said, "We got to go. We're out of time." And the IT guy interjected and says, "Well, I'm sure I've looked. This is going to cover the manufacturing process that we do." And it was kind of like, I was like, "Okay, you guys want to exit the meeting, and you guys say it's good." Well, then when we went to do everything on the implementation, we got the manufacturing process. It was like, that's not the way it works. And it created a problem for us, and it created a problem for the customer. Eventually we got around to it by bringing in another third-party product in to address that piece. But again, it was kind of like we think we're okay. We've been told we're okay, but the customer was kind of acting like they knew when they didn't know and didn't ask the questions. So again, the more questions, the better in terms of the sales process of talking about third-party products or things that you want to bring in, and we make sure that it does do everything that the customer's expectations are.
Yeah, and almost ask to see it, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, yeah, we do that, but a lot of times, you run into a situation where our understanding of, what you're asking versus, maybe what you really are asking are just different. So can we see that and walk through how it would actually happen in our environment? I think interesting thing about that scenario, because I know which customer you're talking about. They had a system that was financials only, and they were looking to add manufacturing. Yes. And so really the reason or the thing that was driving the decision was the manufacturing module. And that was the one module that they decided they didn't need to look at, right?
Yeah.
They looked at the financials and said, yeah, it pretty much is what we have today and looks good, and we'll solve the one issue that we've got, and then really kind of missed out on probably the most important aspect of
all because of this time limitation.
Yeah,
we budgeted 2 hours for this meeting, and we've got 2 hours. We're done.
Yeah, that is unusual, really. I mean, yeah, and to Jeremy's point, a lot of times, demos of products, you're trying to digest, the entire thing in an hour or two, and typically you're going to get all the sizzle, right? But maybe not the steak underneath, and
Right.
Really to kind of dig in, do some due diligence around your processes and make sure that the system is really designed to accommodate that process and maybe even see it in action.
Yeah, and some of the processes or some of the solutions now are a little bit easier I wouldn't say totally easy. So it's a case by case basis, but putting a test environment in with the solution, trying to run through
Right.
some examples, and that goes a long way. I mean, it's maybe there's some budget that goes out the window at the front end to get through that due diligence to really make sure it's the right fit, but it pays off in spades with the assurance that you're getting what you think you're going to get, and that it's going to do what you want to do. We had some clients that, the question, I'm always leery of a sales guy that says, yes, 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 it does that well, and doesn't show it, because all said and done, you get to the end process and maybe it does it, but you got to jump through 3 hoops to get to that one piece of the puzzle that you're really seeing. And now the labor intensiveness of that action is not outweighing the benefit. So it's,
I frequent to dovetail off of that, Jeremy. I frequently will say, you can honestly say when, you're talking about a product that, the question gets asked, can it do A? And the honest answer is yes, it can do A. Later on, you guys, can it do B? Well, certainly it can do B. And then later on, can it do C? Yes, it can do C. But the question that doesn't get asked, that sometimes, we don't ask back, is can it do A, B, and C simultaneously? Right?
Right.
Is one option blocking out another option? And that possibility exists in software. So go back to your point, that sometimes go actually working through it to make sure, because you can honestly say A, B, and C are all true, but nobody asked A, B, and C at the same time. And
yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the other thing that needs to be looked back at pretty quickly as you get through due diligence or any new process or solution you put into it is, did it end up having the ROI? Was there true business value? And we're in the middle of an implementation right now where, some of the dream was, all this control and data being there, but when it really you boil it all down, the value of the process and that data is of no value. And did it make sense to do that process to begin with, and really revisiting that return on investment that you're trying to put into something that you're buying or deciding to go forward to. So,
yeah.
Pull the chute quickly if you can.
Yeah. Well, the other point, that I'm thinking about is, and we've not to advertise this, but we've done this successfully, I can think of twice now in the last 6 months, and is to actually do like a test pilot, right? I mean, it's one thing to sit through a demo and have the consultant show you how it works, but it's another thing to actually install it, right, on a test server and actually sit a couple people down and take them through the process of entering an order and walking a work order through the production process in the software with some of your own data. And I mean,
Right.
we've offered that up and done that because from the consultant's perspective, it eliminates risk too, right? I mean, nobody wants a troubled system, the customer or the consulting firm, right? We want a successful implementation. And so, we realize that maybe it's difficult to get all the information in the sales process. So how about we put you on this system for a day and actually allow you to walk through it and ask questions. And when we've done that, I mean, I think we've had very successful results in implementation out of that. So.
Yeah, that someone comes back to the user testing point. The more we can get the hands on it and some true transactions walking through, you find those gotchas. We don't have this piece of data yet, so you have to set that data up before you can move the process forward, and seeing what that workload is based on the data sets. But the more you can do a free trial or spend some time up front, it'll go a long way. So that's our 5 topics. I think we kind of came up with a bonus topic, which we're talking about here already, which is, we've seen a ton of clients that decide to do something and have never posed the question to us. Not that we're the end all be all, but a simple question to us to, how would you think of this process being put in place or this solution outside e-commerce coming in. That's the horror story that I think of when I think of this is a client deciding to put an e-commerce solution in, because they see an opportunity to sell more, and the sales team of the organization is hopped up, and they go down this path, and they buy that sizzle of a e-commerce platform, but no one's talked about the idea of where do those transactions come into the system, how are they going to get keyed in, what's the pricing going to be, is there an integration that's needed up front, or is this just a small portion of the business now, and it will grow later. But things that you're thinking about doing, posing a question to us just to be a sounding board is something we like, because we might be able to go back to an example of a client that did the exact same thing, and you can learn through those stories and through those references of maybe what not to do and hurdles that got in the way. So any other examples of not, you don't know what you don't know, so the more people you can possibly get involved to get feedback is kind of the topic.
Well, along those same lines, I mean, it's a little different, but I'm thinking about, we've been called into a number of situations in the past that, for companies that are using Sage. We're not, they either don't have a partner, we're not the partner, but we go in and, they're ready to throw the system out. And, what we'll do is say, hey, can you put together kind of a list of, your issues, questions, things your wish list of what's not working about Sage, what it can't do. And, you can go down that list and quickly figure out that most of that, a lot of that can be done inside of Sage. It just hasn't been implemented, or the customer's not aware of it. We haven't trained on it. Maybe there's a third-party solution that integrates into Sage that the customer's not aware of, that solve, like the e-commerce you were talking about, that solves that issue. So, a lot of times it's what you said, just ask the question, hey, we're thinking about doing this, or this is a pain point for us. Can you help this? Can you help in this? Does Sage have any functionality around that? And, it's not 100% solution, but over the years, I mean, we've been able to, right environments, we've been able to solve, 90% of it for sure through, new functionality that the customer's not aware of, or third party.
Or even as basic as someone's got some spreadsheet that they're tracking something, I'm thinking specifically of one that someone was tracking actually serial numbers on a spreadsheet. And it was like, well, they didn't want to use serialized inventory, but okay, well, we can certainly add a UDF right on it and report back in the system. We don't need to have a separate spreadsheet that someone's recording all that. Just key the UDF, user defined field, we're using abbreviations there, but just put it in. So, again, it's just a question gets asked. It's like, well, we can do something about that. Sometimes we'll say we can't, and yeah, you're right. That's a problem, but every system has its limitations. But kind of fairly quickly, well, there is a better way to do that.
It's one of our favorite things to do is go in and say, put your list together in 3 things. There'll be 3 categories of things. We'll just break it down into, you can do it today. It's already built in. We just need to turn it on and train on it, right? Or, it's going to be third-party customization. Like, you can do it, but you're going to have to spend a little money because we have to add this functionality into Sage. Or it's going to be, we don't do that very well at all. We would just stay away from that, right? So, you go from no money or very little money to a little bit of money. And then there are things that, we would just advise against, right? But if you put the list together, we enjoy that, right?
Yeah. That's kind of the fun part of consulting, is when you can bring value and make people's lives easier.
Yeah, old habits die hard. Those things that you're doing outside of the system, take a good look at those, because you might find that the system already does it and you just don't know the button to click. You're tracking data, or if you had one user defined field to track this data, everything would be in one system, and you are mitigating the backup of that spreadsheet that's saved on a local laptop, and no one knows where it is because the user maintains it locally, and you're getting it into a more systemized basis. But the topic really is, you don't know what you don't know. So don't be afraid to ask, and we'll try to give you an honest opinion pretty quickly of whether it's something that's doable or not, and how we can help on that time gain or ROI on that process. So with that being said, I'm going to go on to Q&A. Certainly, you can call us at our 330 number, 777-0650. You can email any one of us questions independently, and we'll be happy to answer those.